The bell that hangs above the Sanctuary of Aldenreach is not rung by hands. It is rung by a chain that runs down through the bell tower and into the wall of the Holy Father's chamber, so that only he, or one who kneels at his bedside, may pull it. In all my 9 years wearing the gray and silver of the sanctuary guard, I had heard that bell sound exactly 4 times. Twice for the death of a warden, once for a fire in the granary. Once when I was very new, for reasons no one would explain to a boy of 19 who still could not stand a full watch without his knees trembling. On the night this account begins, the bell rang a 5th time, and I was the one who ran to it. I want to be careful here, because much of what men now say about that night is wrong, and some of it is wrong on purpose. So I will tell it plainly in the order it happened, and I will not pretend I understood any of it while it was happening. I understood almost nothing. I was a guardsman. My whole training had been to stand and to watch and to keep my mouth shut. That night, for the first time, all 3 of those things failed me, and I have been trying ever since to earn back the stillness I lost. My name is Corin. I was, at the time, 30 years old, a guard of the inner cloister, which sounds grander than it was. It meant I stood the 3rd watch outside the Holy Father's own wing, from the striking of the 2nd hour after midnight until dawn, on the coldest stretch of stone the old builders ever laid. The inner cloister was a long gallery of white columns, and at the far end of it were the doors to the private chambers, the study, the small chapel, and the sleeping room where the Holy Father lay through the last winter of his life. His name I will give you as the people gave it to him, because his true name he had set aside 60 years before when he took the gray robe. They called him the Holy Father Benedin. He was the 9th to bear that title in the Sanctuary of Aldenreach, and by the count of the archivists he was the oldest, 91 years, they said, though he himself claimed he had lost the thread of it somewhere and would not swear to any number. He had a way of saying such things that made the young ones laugh and the old ones lower their eyes, because they knew the joke covered a grief. He had outlived everyone he began with. That is a lonely kind of holiness, to be the last of your own mourning. I had spoken to him perhaps a dozen times in 9 years, and never for longer than a breath. A guardsman does not speak, but he spoke to me. That was his way. He spoke to everyone, the kitchen boys and the stone cutters and the guards who were meant to be furniture. Once passing me at dawn when I had stood the whole night through a sleet that turned my cloak to a sheet of ice, he had stopped and looked at me and said only, "You are still here, Corin." And then, before I could decide whether that was a question, he had touched 2 fingers to the frozen wool at my shoulder, the way a man tests whether a wall will hold, and gone in. I had thought about those 4 words more than any sermon I ever heard him preach. You are still here. As though my being there were a small astonishment, as though it mattered that I had not gone. Now the bell rang, on a night in the deep of the year with the snow coming sideways past the high windows, and I ran. I want you to understand what running meant. In the sanctuary guard, one did not run. We had a saying drilled into us from the first week: the still man is the true wall. A guard who runs has already failed, because he has let the thing he fears reach the place he was meant to keep it from. The whole art of us was to be so early, so watchful, so unmoving, that running was never necessary. To run down the inner cloister was to announce to God and everyone that the wall had broken. But the bell had rung, and the bell was the Holy Father's own hand. And so I ran, and my boots on the white stone sounded like a hammer on a coffin, and behind me I heard old Warden Mescar shout my name, and I did not stop for him. The doors to the sleeping room were open. That was the first wrong thing. They were never open at that hour. Inside, the room was warm and low-lit. One lamp turned down to a coal-colored glow, and the air smelled of the bitter herbs the physicians burned to ease his breathing. 2 of them, the physicians, stood at the foot of the bed with their hands folded, and their faces doing that particular slack helplessness that learned men wear when their learning has run out. And in the bed, propped on a bank of white pillows so that he was nearly sitting, was the Holy Father Benedin, and he was looking straight at the door, and when I came through it, his whole face changed. I have seen relief on the faces of men rescued from drowning. I have seen it on a mother whose lost boy is put back in her arms. I had never before seen it on the face of a dying man looking at a guardsman he had spoken to a dozen times in 9 years. But that is what it was. Relief. As though he had been waiting for me, specifically me, and had begun to fear I would not come. "Shut the door," he said. His voice was a thread, but the thread was iron. "Corin, shut the door and bar it." I did not move. A guardsman takes orders from the warden of the guard, from the Lord Chancellor of the Sanctuary, and from the Holy Father himself, but a lifetime of drill does not turn on a coin. To bar that door was to shut out the physicians, the warden, the whole apparatus of care that surrounded a dying pontiff. It was unthinkable. "Holy Father," one of the physicians began, "he should not exert." "Out," said Benedin, and though the word had no strength in it, it had 60 years of habit behind it, 60 years of a room emptying when he wished it empty. The physicians looked at each other. Then they went. They passed me at the door, and one of them, the younger, met my eyes with a look I could not read then and can read perfectly now. It was warning. He knew something. He was afraid of it, and he was glad it was going to be my burden and not his. When they had gone, I stood alone in the doorway with the old man, and the snow ticked against the glass, and somewhere below the bell chain still swung a little from where he had pulled it, whispering against the wall like something alive. "Bar it," he said again, gentler now. "Please, Corin, there is not much time and I would not have us interrupted." I barred the door. I want to set down clearly the thing I felt in that moment, because it was not fear, though fear would have been reasonable. It was something closer to vertigo, the sense a man gets on a high wall when he realizes the ground he trusted is a very long way down. All my life had been arranged so that I would never be alone with a decision. There was always a warden above me, a rule beside me, a wall at my back. The whole comfort of the gray robe was that it took your decisions from you and gave you a post to keep instead. And now the highest man in that world had emptied the room, barred us in together, and made me a guardsman, a still wall, a piece of furniture that had learned to breathe, the only other soul present. The decisions were about to become mine. I could feel them coming the way you feel weather. "Come here," he said, "where I can see you. My eyes have gone to fog at the edges. Come into the light." I crossed the room and knelt at the bedside, because that is what one did, and because my legs wanted the floor. Close up, he was smaller than I had ever let myself see. The great Holy Father Benedin, whose voice had filled the Sanctuary of Aldenreach at 100 high feasts, was a small old man with a bird's bones and skin like the paper of very old books, and his hand, when it came out from under the coverlet and closed on my wrist, weighed almost nothing. But the grip was the same iron as the voice. He held my wrist the way a falling man holds a rope. "Do you know," he said, "how long I have watched you?" "Holy Father, you have spoken to me perhaps." "That is not what I asked." A small dry smile. "I asked if you know how long I have watched you. 9 years you have stood my third watch. Before that, 4 years at the almsgate. Before that, 2 years in the novice barracks, a boy who could not keep his boots clean and wept in the dark when he thought no one heard, because he had no family in the world and had come to us with nothing but the name a road gave him." His fog-gray eyes found mine and held. "You did not know I knew that. You thought you were furniture. You were never furniture to me, Corin, not for one single day." I could not speak. Something was rising in my chest that had no name I was allowed to use. "I am going to die tonight," he said, as easily as another man might say I am going to bed. "Perhaps in an hour, perhaps before the third bell. It does not frighten me. I have been ready for a long time, and I am tired in a way you cannot understand yet, though you will. What frightens me, what has frightened me for a year, since the physicians first told me my heart was a cracked bell, is what will happen to the sanctuary when I am gone. And that, Corin, is why I rang for you, and not for the warden, and not for the Lord Chancellor, and not for the good and gentle men who would weep at my bedside and mean every tear and still, God forgive them. Let the wrong thing happen because they had not the stomach to stop it. He drew a breath that cost him, and I heard the cracked bell of his heart in it. I need a still man, he said. I need a wall. I have spent a year looking for one, and I have watched a great many strong men, and every one of them, when I looked closely, would move. For fear, or for hope, or for a soft word, or for a hard threat, every one of them in the end would move. Except you. I have watched you stand through sleet and grief and boredom and the small daily cruelties that wear a man down, and you have not moved. So I am going to lay upon you a thing I have no right to lay on any man, and I am going to ask you to be a wall one more time, when it will be harder to stand still than it has ever been in your life. Will you hear it? And God help me, I said yes. I said it before I knew what I was agreeing to, because he was the Holy Father and I was a guardsman, and the word yes was bred into my bones. But I want to be honest. Even if I had known, I think I would have said it anyway. There was something in his face that a man does not refuse. Not the authority, the trust. He had chosen me out of everyone to be the wall, and a man who has spent his whole life believing he is furniture will walk into fire to be, just once, chosen. Good, he whispered. Then listen, and do not speak until I have finished, because if you speak I may lose the thread, and there is no time to find it again. He closed his eyes. When he opened them they had gone somewhere far off, into 60 years of dark. Long ago, he said, before I was Benedin, when I was a young priest with a young priest's certainty, there was a night the Sanctuary of Aldenreach nearly tore itself in two. You will not have heard of it. We buried it so deep that the archivists themselves believe the false version. But I was there, and I have carried the true version alone for 60 years, and I will not carry it into the ground, because it did not stay buried. It has grown down there in the dark, and it is about to come up through the floor of everything I built, and only you and I know where the crack will open. The snow ticked against the glass. The bell chain whispered, and the old man began to tell me the secret that would, before the next dawn, shock the whole sanctuary, though I did not yet know that the sharpest part of it was pointed straight at me. The Sanctuary of Aldenreach is not a kingdom, he said, though men treat it as one, and the treating of it as one is where all the trouble comes from. It is a house of prayer that grew too rich and too old. Holy Father does not rule as a king rules, he keeps. He keeps the seal, he keeps the peace between the great families who endow us, he keeps the poor fed and the archive whole and the bell rung at the hours. But over the centuries the keeping came to look like ruling, and where there is ruling there is succession, and where there is succession there are men who would kill for it or something worse than kill. He turned his head on the pillow. How is a new Holy Father chosen, Corin? Say it. You learned it as a novice. The Conclave of Wardens, I said. The 12 senior wardens gather in the Chamber of Keys and elect from among the ordained. When 2/3 agree, the seal is pressed to the choosing parchment, and the new father is. The seal, he said, yes. The seal is pressed to the parchment, and without the true seal there is no lawful choosing. A conclave may vote until they are hoarse, but until the seal falls on the parchment, no man is Holy Father, he is only a man other men have agreed to like. The seal is the whole of it. The seal is Aldenreach. Do you understand? The one who holds the seal on the morning after my death holds the succession itself, because the 12 will choose whoever the seal is willing to be pressed for. It has always been so. It is the crack in us. It is the thing I have spent a year lying awake over. And the seal is kept, I began, then remembered I was not to speak and stopped. Seal is kept in the reliquary, he said, behind 3 locks, and the 3 keys are held by 3 men, the Lord Chancellor, the Warden of the Guard, and myself. That is the law, that is what everyone believes, that is what the archive records. His grip tightened on my wrist, and now I felt something in it I had not felt before, a tremor that was not weakness. It was urgency held down hard. And it is a lie, Corin, it has been a lie for 60 years. The seal in the reliquary is a copy. A beautiful copy, cast in the same silver, cut by the same gild. indistinguishable to any eye but to mine, and the man who made it, and he has been 40 years in his grave. The true seal of Aldenreach has never once been in that reliquary in all the time I have been father. I moved it the first week of my keeping, and I hid it, and I told no living soul, and I have guarded that hiding place with my own 2 hands and my own silence for 60 years. I knelt very still. It was the only skill I had, and I used it. But inside, everything I thought I understood about the world I lived in was quietly coming apart. "Why?" I said. It was not permitted, but it came out of me anyway, one word low. He did not scold me for it. He almost smiled. "Because of the night I told you of, the night we nearly tore in two." His eyes closed again. "There was a chancellor then, a hard, brilliant, hungry man named Orzik. When the old father before me lay dying, Orzik meant to take the seal by force and press it for himself while the body was still warm, before the conclave could gather. He had guards bought, he had wardens bought, he had everything but the seal in his hand, and he moved for it in the dark of the night the father died. And a young priest, I will not pretend it was anyone but me, got to the reliquary 1 hour ahead of him, took the true seal and put a copy in its place, and let Orzik seize the copy and rule the conclave with it and press it, gloating, for the man he had bought. And the conclave chose that man, and nothing happened, because it was not the true seal. The choosing was void from the first breath, and no one knew it but me, and I let it stand. I let the bought man wear the robe for 11 months, because to unmask it would have torn us apart with no gain but my own being right. I waited. Orzik overreached, as hungry men do. He was exposed for other crimes, his bought father resigned in disgrace, and a clean conclave gathered and chose me, and I let the true seal fall on my choosing and mine alone, and from that day I have kept it hidden and kept the copy in the light, so that no man could ever again do what Orzik tried to do. Let them fight over the copy. Let them scheme for it, steal it, press it 100 times. It chooses nothing. The true seal is where no thief will ever look, and it will fall only for a father the sanctuary has honestly chosen. He opened his eyes. That was the work of my life, Corin, not the sermons, not the alms, that. I made the succession theft proof by making the whole world reach for a fake. And now I am dying, and there is a new Orzik in my house, and if the secret dies with me, the fake becomes the true again, because there will be no one alive who knows the difference, and he will seize it and press it, and no one will be able to say the choosing is void. Do you see? Do you see what I have to do before the 3rd bell, and why it has to be you?" I saw. God help me, I began to see. "You want me to know where the true seal is," I said. "I want you," he said, "to be its keeper." The words fell into the room and lay there. Outside, far off, the wind changed and threw a great soft handful of snow against the window, and the lamp shivered, and for a moment the old man's face was underlit and strange, like a carving of himself. "There is a new Orzik," I said. "You said there is a new Orzik. Who?" "You know who," said Benedin. "You have stood your watch. You have watched the great men come and go past your post at all hours. You are not stupid, Corin. You have only been trained to seem so. Think. Who in this house has, this last year, made himself indispensable to a dying old man? Who has, one by one, had my honest friends sent to distant houses on kind-sounding errands? Who holds one of the 3 keys already, and speaks so gently, and is so patient, and has the conclave half in his hand before I am even cold?" And I did know, of course I knew, there was only one man it could be. "The Lord Chancellor," I said, "Chancellor Weimar." Benedin closed his eyes as though the name hurt him, and perhaps it did, because I learned later that he had raised Weimar, had loved him once, had seen in him 30 years ago the son the gray robe forbade him. "Weimar," he agreed, so quietly I nearly lost it under the snow. "Who will come to this room within the hour of my death, weeping true tears, and take my key from around my neck with his own gentle hands, and go to the reliquary, and take the seal, the copy, though he will not know it is the copy, and by dawn he will have pressed it for himself before a conclave he has spent a year buying, and he will be Holy Father Benedin, and the Sanctuary of Aldenreach will belong, body and soul, to a hungry man who learned from me how to want things and learned nothing at all of how to hold them lightly. And I could stop it with one sentence. I could tell the warden the reliquary seal is false. But the moment I say that sentence aloud to any man who might repeat it, the true seal is hunted, and I do not think I have the hours left to see it safe, and I do not know, I have not known for a year, which of the men around me I can trust with it. He opened his eyes, and they were wet, and they were fixed on me with a terrible, gentle finality. Except you. I have watched you for 13 years. You are the only wall in my house that has never once moved. So I am giving the crack of the whole sanctuary into a guardsman's hands, and I am asking you to stand in it. And I am so sorry, Corin. I am so sorry for what I am about to cost you. I should have been afraid. I think later I was more afraid than I had ever been in my life. But in that moment, kneeling at the bedside of the dying old man who had just told me I was the only wall in his house, I felt something I am ashamed to name and cannot deny. I felt chosen. After a life of being furniture, I would have carried the whole reliquary out on my back if he had asked it. I bowed my head until my brow touched the cold coverlet over his hand. "Tell me where it is," I said. "Tell me what to do. I will not move." "I know you will not," he whispered. "That is the whole of why we may be saved. Now listen very closely, because I can say the hiding place only once, and after I have said it you must never speak it aloud again, not to a friend, not to a priest, not to God in a room where a wall might have ears." He drew me down close, so close I could smell the herbs and the age and the faint sweetness that comes into a dying man's breath, and he told me, "I will not set the place down here. I have kept the old man's silence for the rest of my life, and I keep it still on this page. But I will say that it was so simple, so humble, so exactly where no schemer would ever stoop to look, that when he said it I nearly laughed aloud in that solemn room, and he saw it, and the ghost of his old mischief crossed his ruined face. Yes, he breathed. In the poorest place in the richest house. Orzik would have torn up the marble floors of the Chancellery for 60 years and never once thought to look asterisk there. Neither will Vamer. That is the joke I have laughed at alone for 6 decades, Corin. I give it to you now. Laugh at it when I am gone. It will help." Then his face changed. The mischief drained out of it, and something older and heavier came up in its place, and his grip on my wrist went from iron to stone. "But the seal is not the whole of it," he said. "The seal is only the lock. There is a key that goes with the lock, and the key is not a thing. The key is a asterisk truth, and it is the truth I have most feared to speak, and I must speak it now, and when I have spoken it you will understand at last why it had to be you. Why, of all the still men in the world, it could only ever have been you." And the room seemed to lean in, and the bell chain went still against the wall, and I knelt in the last hour of the Holy Father Benedin's life, and waited for the truth that was pointed at my own heart. 30 years ago, he said, in the deep of a winter as hard as this one, a woman came to the almsgate of Aldenreach in the black hours before dawn. She was young and sick and half frozen, and she carried a bundle in her arms, and she would not give her name. The gate brother tried to send her to the almshouse, but she would not go. She said she must speak to the Father, only the Father, and she would not move from the gate though the cold was killing her. And someone, out of pity or exhaustion, sent for me. I was Father Benedin by then, 5 years into my keeping, and I came down to the almsgate in the dark expecting a madwoman. He stopped. His breath had gone very shallow, and I feared for a moment that the thread had broken, but he found it. She was not mad, he said. She was dying, and she knew it, and she had walked a very long way to die at our gate for one reason. She put the bundle into my arms. It was a child. A boy, perhaps a year old, wrapped against the cold in a good cloak that had once belonged to someone with money and no longer did. And she looked at me. I have never in 60 years forgotten how she looked at me, and she said, Asterisk. His father was a great man in this house, and his father is dead, and there are men who would kill this child rather than let him be what he is. I cannot say the name. Swear to me you will keep him and never say the name and let him grow up as no one so that he may grow up at all. And then she told me the name, in a whisper, only me, the way I am about to tell it to you. And then she died. She died in my arms at the almsgate before the sun was up, and we buried her as a nameless traveler, and I kept the child. The snow ticked. My own heart had begun to beat so hard I was sure he could hear it. I could not raise him myself, Benedin said. A father cannot keep a child in his chambers. The whole house would have asked whose he was, and the asking would have killed him because the men his mother feared were real, and some of them are in this house still. So I did the only thing I could. I hid him the way I hid the seal in the poorest place in the richest house, in plain and humble sight, where no schemer would ever stoop to look for a thing of value. I gave him to the foundling barracks. I let him grow up as one more orphan the road had left at our door, with a name the road gave him and no family in the world. And I watched him. Every year of his life from a distance I watched him, and I made small quiet arrangements, that he was fed, that he was taught, that when he was old enough he was taken into the one place in Aldenreach where a nameless orphan can become a man of honor and no one asks after his blood. His hand rose, trembling from my wrist to my face, and his fingers, light as ash, touched my cheek. The guard, Corin, I put him in the guard. And he grew into the stillest, truest wall in all my house, and stood my own third watch for 9 years, and never once knew that the old man he thought he had spoken to a dozen times had in truth held him as an infant at a frozen gate, and buried his mother, and carried his name alone for 30 years. I could not breathe. I knelt in the lamplight and could not breathe, and the whole room had tilted like the deck of a ship, and the old man's ashlight fingers were on my face, and his fog-gray eyes were streaming and shining at once. "You are still here, Corin," he whispered, the same 4 words from the sleep morning 9 years gone, and now I understood that they had never been a small thing at all. They had been the deepest astonishment and the deepest gratitude a man can feel, watching the child he saved grow into a good man against every odds. "You have always been still here. Do you know now why I could not lose you? Do you know now why, of all the walls in the world, it had to be this one?" "No," I said. "It came out of me as a boy's voice, not a guardsman's." "No." "Holy Father, tell me it is not. I have no father, I have no name, I came off the road, I am nobody." "You are not nobody," he said, and for the last time his voice found its old iron, the voice that had filled the sanctuary at 100 feasts, gathered now to say one sentence to one kneeling man. "You have never once in your life been nobody. You are the son your mother died to hide. Your father was a great man of this house. I will give you his name in a moment, and you must bury it as deep as I have. And the men who would have killed you as an infant are the very men who now reach for the seal, because your blood, Corin, your hidden, humble, unclaimed blood, is closer to the old line of Aldenreach than any man now living, closer than Vamer, closer than any warden in the Chamber of Keys. If it were ever known, if you ever pressed your claim, you could unseat them all. That is the truth I have carried. That is the key that fits the lock, the true seal and the true blood in one nameless guardsman that no schemer ever thought to look at twice." His hand fell from my face to grip my hand with the last of his strength. "And now I am going to ask you the cruelest thing an old man ever asked a young one. I am going to give you a crown, and in the same breath forbid you to wear it. Will you still be my wall, Corin? Knowing what I have just made you, knowing what you could take, will you stand in the crack not to seize the sanctuary, but to save it, and then step back into the gray and be nobody again forever, so that the house your father died for may live?" I do not know how long I knelt there. Time had come off its hinges. I was 30 years old, and I had just been handed, in the space of a quarter hour, a mother, a father, a name, a claim to the highest seat in my whole world, and the command to bury every part of it and go back to standing in the cold as no one. My whole life reorganized itself around that bedside like iron filings around a stone. Every friendless dawn in the foundling barracks, every night I had wept in the dark believing the road had thrown me away, none of it had been true. I had not been thrown away. I had been hidden on purpose by love, so that I could grow up at all. The grief of 30 years and the healing of it arrived in the same instant, and I knelt in the wreck of it and could not speak. And then, because I was what he had made me, I found my voice. It was steady. I do not know how, but it was steady. I will be your wall, I said. I will keep the seal, and I will keep the blood, and I will keep the silence. I will save the house, and then I will step back into the gray, and I will be no one gladly all the rest of my life. Not because you command it, Holy Father, because you are right, and because a man who takes a thing meant for keeping and turns it into a thing for himself is Orzik, is Vamer, and you did not raise me to be Vamer. You raised me to be still. I lifted my head. Give me the name, I will bury it. And then tell me what you need me to do before the third bell, and I will do it, and it will be done well, because you spent 30 years teaching me how without either of us knowing it. The most extraordinary thing happened then. The Holy Father Benedin, 91 years old and 1 hour from death, laughed, a small, cracked, delighted laugh. The laugh of a man who has gambled his life's work on a single throw and watched it come up true. There he is, he said. There is the wall. Oh, I chose well. I chose so well. He drew me down, and he whispered the name of my father into my ear, and I will not write it, and it does not matter, and it changed nothing about who I chose to be, which I think was the last lesson he meant to teach me, and the one he was proudest of. Then he lay back against the pillows, spent, gray, but with a lightness in his ruined face that had not been there when I ran through the door, as though a weight of 60 years had finally rolled off him onto younger shoulders. Now, he said, the third bell will ring soon, and I will likely go with it, and within the hour Vamer will come. Here is what you will do, my son. Here is exactly what you will do. The plan he gave me was not the plan of a dying man. It was the plan of the coldest, clearest strategist I have ever known, delivered in a thread of a voice with his eyes half shut. And I have thought since that this final, ruthless, tender cunning, was the truest picture of Benedin I was ever shown. The gentle father who spoke to kitchen boys had, underneath, the mind of a man who had beaten Orzik at 19 and kept a lie perfect for 60 years. He was giving me that mind now, all of it, to carry after him. You will not fight Vamer, he said. Understand that first. You are one guardsman. He holds a key, he holds the conclave, he holds the law's own appearance. If you draw a blade on him, you are a madman who attacked the grieving Chancellor at the Father's deathbed, and you will be taken, and the seal will be lost, and I will have chosen wrong. You will not fight him. You will do something far harder. You will let him win the copy. I said nothing. I only listened the way he had trained me to listen, gathering every word. When I am dead, he said, you will unbar this door and you will resume your post as though nothing has passed between us. You will let the physicians in. You will let them find me gone. You will stand your watch. And when Vamer comes, and he will come quickly, weeping, and he will take the key from around my neck, and you will want to stop him, and you will not, you will stand aside and let him take it. Let him go to the reliquary. Let him take the copy. Let him call his conclave. Let him press the false seal for himself before the whole assembled house at dawn, gloating, certain, triumphant. A terrible small smile. And then my wall at the exact right moment, not before, not after, at the moment his hand comes down, and every eye in the chamber of keys is fixed on the falling seal. You will do the one thing that unmakes him. You will produce the true seal in the sight of the 12, and you will say the words I am about to give you. And the whole edifice of his year of scheming will come down in a single breath, because a choosing pressed with a false seal is void, and he will have voided himself in front of every man whose vote he bought. He will say the true seal is the false one, I said quietly. It is my word, a guardsman's word, against the Lord Chancellor's. He will, Benedin agreed, pleased that I had seen it. And that is why the seal alone is not enough, and why God, or luck, or my own long care, gave us the second thing. There is a mark on the true seal that is not on the copy. The maker put it there at my asking, 40 years ago, a flaw, so small no eye finds it unless it knows to look, cut into the inner curve of the silver where the wax never reaches. And I set down the truth of that flaw in my own hand, 60 years ago, and sealed it, and placed it in the one archive no chancellor may open and no warden may burn, the testament vault, where a father's own written words are kept sealed until his death and read aloud by law before the conclave that follows him. Weimar cannot touch it. It is the one thing in all Aldenreach his year of buying could not buy, because to open the testament vault before a father is dead is the one crime even a bought conclave will not commit. It is the crime that would make the whole choosing unlawful in the sight of every family that endows us. He has left the testament sealed because he must. And in it Corin, waiting 60 years, is a page in my hand that describes the flaw on the true seal and names the copy for a copy. And if I have the strength before I go, one more line I will add tonight. His eyes found mine. When you produce the seal and he cries false, you will ask the conclave to open the testament and read it. They must. It is law. And my own dead voice will rise up out of that vault and name the true seal true, and name the copy false, and name Weimar for what he is. He cannot silence a dead father's testament. It is the one weapon he built the whole world to reach for the fake instead of, and never dreamed I had turned it against him. I understood then that I was kneeling in the presence of the finest mind, the Sanctuary of Aldenreach had produced in 100 years, and that it was going out like a lamp, and that it had spent its last oil arming a nameless guardsman to save a house full of men who would never know they had been saved. There is one danger, he said, and now the pleasure went out of his voice and only the gravity remained. The hours between my death and the conclave. Once Weimar has the copy and thinks himself safe, he is generous, he need hurt no one. But if he suspects, even for a moment, that a true seal exists and that you know where it is, he becomes Orsic again, and Orsic did not scruple at murder. So from the moment I die until the moment you produce the seal in the chamber, you must be the stillest wall you have ever been. He must look at you and see furniture. He must take your standing aside for grief or duty and never once for a plan. If he reads you, Corin, if he sees the sun in you, or the keeper, he will have you killed before dawn and search the whole sanctuary stone by stone, and he has men enough to do both. Your stillness is not a virtue tonight. It is your life, and it is the life of everything I built. Can you be furniture one more time, for me, for the last time? Yes, I said. Then go and get the seal now, he said, while the house sleeps and I am not yet dead and no eye watches the corridors. Bring it here. I want to hold it once more before I go, and I want to be sure the hiding place is unspoiled, and I want, his voice cracked, and for the first time it was not strategy but a very old and very tired man. I want to see it in your hands, Corin. My two great secrets, the seal and the sun, together in one pair of hands at last before I close my eyes. Let an old man have that. Then bring me my writing board and I will add the last line to the testament, and then you will unbar the door and it will be as though this hour never was. Go quietly. Go now. I rose. My legs held, though I do not know how. I unbarred the door with hands that had gone strangely calm, the calm that comes when a man's whole self has narrowed to a single task, and I slipped out into the inner cloister, and I found it empty. The warden had gone to rouse the Lord Chancellor, and the physicians waited in an antechamber, and the long white gallery lay silent under the ticking snow. I walked its length at a guardsman's even pace, as though I were only changing posts, and I went to the poorest place in the richest house, the humble hidden corner the old man had named in my ear, and I stooped where no schemer in 60 years had ever stooped, and I put in my hand, and I felt it. I will not describe the finding, I have kept the silence. But I will tell you that when my fingers closed on the true seal of Aldenreach, a heavier weight of silver than I expected, cold as the stone it had lain against for 6 decades, something passed through me that I have no honest word for. It was not power. I had felt the fake authority of power at my post for years, the way the great men wore it. This was the opposite of that. It was asterisk trust, asterisk solid and cold and heavy, put into my hand by a dying man who had every reason to trust no one and had chosen me anyway. I held the whole succession of the Sanctuary of Aldenreach in a guardsman's white glove, in a dark corner, in the small hours, and no living soul knew but the old man dying at the end of the gallery. And I understood, standing there, that I would sooner die than betray it, not out of law, not out of drill, but out of something warmer and older that had been put into me at a frozen gate 30 years before, and had waited all this time to be given a name. I carried it back. I brought it into the lamplit room and I put it into his hands, the true seal, and the old man's fingers closed on it, and he wept without a sound, and he turned it over once, and found the flaw with his thumbnail in the dark by feel alone, and nodded, satisfied, and pressed it back into my glove, and folded my fingers over it with both his ruined hands. There, he breathed, both of you at once, my seal and my son. I have kept you 60 years and 30 years, and now I give you to each other and to the house. Guard it well, guard it. And here the strength went out of him all at once like water out of a cracked jar, and he sank into the pillows, and I thought for one heart-stopped moment that he had gone right then. But he had not. He rallied barely. "The board," he whispered. "The writing board, quickly, while I can still hold the pen." I brought him the small writing board and the pen, and I held the lamp close, and with a hand that shook so that I feared the letters would be lost, the Holy Father Benedin wrote a single line onto a slip of testament parchment. I did not read it, it was not mine to read, and would be read by law before the conclave, but I saw the shape of his hand moving, slow and enormous, spending the last of him on it. And when he was done, he sealed the slip with a drop of wax and his own thumb ring. And he told me where in the testament vault the sealed testament lay, and how the slip must be added to it before dawn, and which single honest warden, old Mescar, the one who had shouted my name in the gallery. The one honest man Benedin had kept close for exactly this, would help me open the vault by the ancient rite of a father's death, and add the last line and reseal it, no questions asked. On the strength of one word, Benedin gave me to say to him. "Mescar is honest," he said, "and slow and stubborn, and he loved me, and he will do what the word tells him and ask nothing. He is the second wall, you are the first. 2 walls, Corin, is enough. It only takes 2 honest men to defeat any number of clever ones if the 2 are stubborn enough not to move." His eyes were closing now and would not fully open again. "Unbar the door, let them in. Let it begin. And Corin." "Holy Father, when it is over," he whispered, "and you have gone back into the gray and no one knows what you did or what you gave up, I want you to remember one thing on the cold nights. You were never furniture. You were the keystone. The whole arch of my life came down to whether one nameless guardsman would stay still in the crack. And you did. Before it even happened, I know that you did. Now go quickly. And thank you, my son, for coming when the bell rang. You always came. You were always still here." Those were the last words the Holy Father Benedin spoke to me, and among the last he spoke to anyone. I unbarred the door. I stepped out into the gallery and took up my post, the seal a cold weight against my heart beneath the gray wool, my face composed into the furniture he had asked me to be. I gave the physicians the smallest nod. They went in. Some minutes later, the 3rd bell rang, but it did not ring by any chain. It rang, they said, of itself in the empty tower, one long note through the falling snow. The physician swore it, and the warden swore it, and I have never troubled to decide whether it was a miracle or a draft in the bell tower, because it does not matter. What matters is that, when it had finished ringing, the Holy Father Benedin was dead, and I stood my post in the cold with the whole future of the sanctuary hidden against my chest, and I did not move. Chancellor Weimar came within the half-hour, exactly as the old man had foretold. I heard him before I saw him, the soft rush of many feet, the murmur of voices pitched to grief, the particular hush that a powerful man's arrival makes in a corridor. He came down the inner cloister at the head of a small tide of clerks and lesser wardens, and 2 of his own household guards, men I knew by sight and did not like, and he was weeping. I want to be fair to him, because I have had years to think about it, and I believe the tears were partly true. Weimar had loved Benedin once, in his way, the way an ambitious man loves the one person he has never been able to deceive. He wept for the old man even as he came to rob the old man's house. Men are made of more than one thing, and the schemers most of all. He was a tall man, Weimar, silver at the temples, with a face built for consolation, long, mild, sorrowful, the kind of face that makes you want to confess your troubles to it. He wore the black and violet of the Chancellery, and around his own neck hung his own key, the second of the 3, and he moved with the terrible gentle certainty of a man who has arranged everything and is now simply walking through the arrangement. When he reached my post, he stopped. He looked at me, and this was the first test, the one Benedin had warned me of, and I did not know until it was on me how hard it would be. "Guardsman," he said softly, "were you at your post when the Holy Father passed?" "I was, my Lord Chancellor," I said. My voice came out flat and dull and empty, the voice of furniture, and I was distantly amazed by it. "Did he speak at the end? Did he say anything?" And under the grief in the question, so faint that a man who had not been warned would never have caught it, was something else. A hook, a test of his own. He was fishing to learn whether the old man had left words behind and with whom. Here was the whole thing balanced on a knife. If I showed one flicker, if the sun in me or the keeper rose to my eyes, he would read it, and I would be dead before dawn and the house lost. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I became the wall. I looked at the Chancellor of the Sanctuary of Aldenreach with the empty, patient, slightly stupid gaze of a man who has stood too many cold watches and thinks too little, and I said, "He asked the physicians to leave him, my lord. Then he slept. Then he did not wake. I heard nothing, I only stand the door. I only stand the door." I watched the words land, and I watched Weimar believe them, and I watched the faint hook go slack in his sorrowful face, and something behind his eyes dismissed me, filed me away as furniture, as a dull post-keeper of no account, as exactly the thing Benedin had spent 30 years making me appear to be. It was the most important lie of my life, and I told it with my face as much as my mouth. He nodded and touched my shoulder in passing, the same 2 fingers, the same gesture the old man had once used, and it turned my stomach to feel it from him, and he went into the body. He was in there a long time. When he came out, he had the old man's key in his hand. I saw it. He had taken it from around the dead father's neck with his own gentle fingers, and he did not hide that he had it, because why should he? He was the Chancellor. The key would be his by the morning's law in any case. But he had not waited for the morning's law. He had it now, in the dark, an hour after the death, and I understood that Benedin had read him to the letter. The man could not wait. The hunger would not let him wait, and the not waiting was the first thread of the rope he was even now, gently, weeping, beginning to hang himself with. "Guardsman," he said again at my post, "there will be a great deal to do tonight. The conclave must be summoned, the families notified, the lying-in prepared. I will need the inner cloister kept quiet and closed. You will admit no one to these chambers but by my word or the warden's. Do you understand?" "Yes, my lord." "Good man," he said, and went with his key and his tide of clerks, down the long gallery and out into the machinery of the night he had spent a year building. And I stood my post, furniture unmoving, and let him go, and every drilled instinct in me screamed to stop him, and I did not move, and it was the hardest stillness of my whole life, harder than sleep, harder than grief, because this time standing still felt exactly like cowardice, and I had to trust an old dead man that it was not. The hours after that were the worst I have ever passed. I will not stretch them out, but I will tell you their shape, because a man reading this should know that the keeping of a great thing is mostly not the grand moment. It is mostly the long, dark hours of holding on when everything in you wants to let go. I had to reach Warden Mescar. I could not leave my post without a reason, and Vamer's men now moved through the wing, quiet and watchful, more of them than the death of a father required. I counted them, and their number told me Vamer was not as certain as he seemed. A truly certain man does not post guards against nothing. When the changing of the watch came at dawn's edge and old Meskar himself came to relieve me, as he did some mornings, I had my chance, and it lasted the length of one hand clasp. I took the old warden's hand in the formal way of the relief, and while our hands were joined and our bodies screened the gesture from the corridor, I spoke into his ear the single word Benedin had given me, one word, an old word, a word I later learned had been a private oath between the two of them 50 years before, and I felt the old man go rigid, and I felt his hand tighten on mine like a vice, and when I drew back his face had not changed at all. Not a flicker. Meskar was a wall too. That was why Benedin had chosen him. He said only, gruffly, for any listener, "Cold night, guardsman. Get some sleep." And in his eyes was the whole understanding, and the whole grief, and the whole terrible resolve of a stubborn, honest old man who has just been told by a dead friend that the house is in danger, and it falls to him to help save it. We could not speak more then, but it was enough. Twice, in the gray hours of that morning, while Vamer's men believed old Meskar was only about a warden's ordinary business of a death, he and I contrived to be alone for the length of a sentence, and in those sentences, passed like coins, we did what Benedin had charged us. Meskar opened the testament vault by the ancient rite of a father's death, a rite no man could question, exercised by the senior warden, witnessed by one guardsman, entered in no register, and I added the sealed last line to the old man's testament with my own hand and resealed the whole, and Meskar closed the vault, and it was done, and no living soul but the two of us knew that Benedin's dead voice now had one more sentence in it, waiting for the conclave like a blade under a cloak. And the seal I kept against my chest. I did not dare hide it anywhere. A hiding place can be found, a searched room can be searched again. The only place in all the sanctuary that Vamer's men would not search was the body of the dull furniture guardsman he had dismissed with 2 fingers on the shoulder. And so I carried the whole succession of Aldenreach against my heart, through a day and a night, and stood my watches and ate my bread, and answered when spoken to, and became so perfectly, deathly still that a man who did not know could have walked past me 100 times and thought me carved from the same stone as the columns. There was 1 hour I nearly broke. It was late on the second night, the night before the conclave, and I was off my post and lying in the guardsman's dormitory pretending to sleep, when 2 of Vamer's household men came through with a lamp, quietly, and went down the row of sleeping guardsmen, looking at faces. I lay with my eyes shut and my breath slow, and the seal a stone against my ribs beneath my shirt, and I heard them stop at my cot. I heard the lamp move over me. I heard one of them say, "Lo, this is the one that stood the Father's door," and the other say, "The Chancellor asked, says he's a dullard, nothing in him," and the first say, "Still." He was there at the end. And a long, long pause in which I did not move, in which I made myself into the deepest stillness I have ever reached, a stillness past fear, a stillness that was almost the death Benedin had just gone into. And then the lamp moved on, and the footsteps went away, and I lay in the dark and shook silently and did not sleep at all, and understood that Benedin had been exactly right. That my stillness was not a virtue but my life, and the life of everything he built, and that the smallest movement would have cost it all. By the time the morning of the conclave came, I had not truly slept in 3 nights, and I had buried a father and a mother I never knew I had, and learned a name I could never speak, and carried a nation's succession against my skin through a house full of quiet armed men who had been told to look at faces. I was 30 years old. I had never in my life been further from the furniture I appeared to be, and never once let it show. And I walked toward the chamber of keys, in my place at the tail of the guard of honor, knowing that within the hour I would do the single most visible thing a sanctuary guardsman can do. I would break the stillness in front of the entire assembled house, and that everything depended on my doing it at exactly the right instant, not a breath early, not a breath late. The false dawn Benedin had warned me was the danger, and here it came. The Chamber of Keys is the oldest room in the Sanctuary of Aldenreach, a high round hall of black-veined stone, older than the Great Hall, older than the bell tower, ringed by 12 tall seats for the 12 senior wardens and one high seat, empty now, for the Father. In its center stands the choosing table, a single slab of white stone, and on it, on the morning of a conclave, lie two things and two things only: the choosing parchment, blank, waiting for a name, and the seal. That morning the seal that lay on the white slab was the copy, beautiful, silver, indistinguishable, false. And beside it stood Chancellor Weimar in the black and violet, his sorrowful face composed into perfect gravity, and I stood with the guard of honor against the curved wall, one gray figure among a dozen, furniture, the true seal a cold weight against my heart. The hall filled. The 12 wardens took their seats, and I watched their faces, and I saw what Benedin had seen, which was that 8 of the 12 would not meet old Mescar's eye, and that told me the tale of the year of buying more plainly than any confession. The family's delegates filled the standing gallery, the great endowing houses of Aldenreach, come to witness the lawful choosing of the 10th Holy Father. The lesser clergy packed the doors. It was, I understood, precisely the crowd Weimar wanted. Large, public, official, a mass of witnesses whose very presence would make the choosing feel legitimate and make any challenge to it look like the raving of a lone madman. He had built his fake succession out in the open, in the fullest light, before the most people, exactly as Benedin had made his fake seal, because the boldest lie is told in front of everyone. It was the same trick. Weimar had learned it from the old man and never understood that the old man could play it better. The rite began. I will not set down all its forms. The senior warden, that was Mescar by his years, and I saw Weimar's people had not managed to move him from that seat, and I understood suddenly why the old man had spent so long keeping Mescar close and safe. He had needed the one honest man to sit in the one seat that could not be denied. Mescar opened the conclave, and named the death of Benedin, and the hall bowed its head, and then the Chancellor stepped forward to the choosing table, and the machinery of the theft began to turn. It went as Benedin had said it would. Warden Weimar had bought Rose and, in a voice thick with false reluctance, proposed the Chancellor himself. In this hour of grief, who else has held us together? Who else did the late father lean upon? And a second bought warden seconded, and a murmur that had been arranged went round the hall like a rehearsed prayer. And one by one the 12 were asked, and 8 said the name of Weimar, and the 2/3 was reached, and it was done, or seemed done, and Weimar bowed his head as though the weight of it grieved him, and reached for the false seal to press it to the parchment and make himself, before the whole house, the 10th Holy Father of Aldenreach. And every eye in the Chamber of Keys fixed on his hand, and the seal beneath it. Not before, not after. At the moment his hand comes down. I stepped out of the wall. I have gone over that instant 10,000 times, and I still do not know where the steadiness came from. Every drilled instinct of 9 years screamed at me to stay in the line. Every muscle had been trained for stillness. To step forward out of the guard of honor, into the center of the most solemn rite of the sanctuary, uninvited, unranked. A nameless gray guardsman breaking formation in the Chamber of Keys before the 12 and the families and the whole clergy. It was the most impossible thing I had ever asked my own body to do. But I did it. I stepped out and I walked to the choosing table, and my boots on the black stone were the only sound in that vast round hall, and I put out my white glove, and between the Chancellor's descending hand and the false seal I set down, on the white slab, the true seal of Aldenreach. The silence that fell was not the silence of a crowd holding its breath. It was the silence of a crowd that does not yet understand what it has seen and is waiting, in dread, to be told. Weimar's hand stopped an inch above the copy. He looked at the second seal that had appeared beside the first, as though a stone had begun to speak. Then he looked at me, and I watched the sorrowful mildness go out of his long face all at once, and for one unguarded instant I saw underneath it the thing Benedin had warned me of, the naked hunger, the Orsic, the man who did not scruple at murder, and it fixed on me with a hatred so pure it was almost admiration, because he understood in that instant that he had been beaten, and that he had been beaten by the furniture. "What is this?" he said. His voice was very quiet. "Guardsman, what have you put on the table?" "The seal of Aldenreach, my lord," I said. I made my voice carry, I had learned, standing all those years in stone halls, how a voice carries, and it filled the round chamber and came back off the black walls, steady, clear, the voice of a wall that had finally chosen to speak. The true seal. The one on the table before it is a copy, cast 60 years ago and kept in the reliquary ever since so that no thief could ever seize the succession by force. The Holy Father Benedin hid the true seal on the first week of his keeping and guarded it with his own hands for 60 years, and in the last hour of his life he gave it into my keeping and charged me to bring it forth at this moment. A choosing pressed with the false seal is void. This is the true one. I asked the conclave to prove them. The hall broke, not into noise at first, into a great single intake of breath. 12 wardens and a gallery of families and a hall full of clergy all breathing in at once. And then the noise, rising, the murmur becoming a roar, and Weimer's face white now, and his household guards along the wall shifting, hands moving, and I stood at the white table with 2 seals before me and did not move and did not look at the guards and kept my eyes on the 12, because the 12 were the only thing that mattered now. "He is mad," Weimer said, and his voice was climbing now, losing its music. "He is a dullard guardsman, grief-struck, put up to this. That is a forgery. That thing he has laid down is a common forgery. Seize him and take that false thing from the table." "It is not a forgery," I said, "and there is a way to prove it, and my Lord Chancellor knows there is, which is why his voice is shaking." I did not raise my own. I let it stay level, and level carried further than his climbing did. The true seal bears a flaw, a single small flaw cut into the inner curve of the silver 40 years ago at the Holy Father's own asking, where the wax never reaches, so small that no eye finds it that does not know to look. The copy does not bear it. And the truth of that flaw, which is true, and which is written in the Holy Father Benedin's own hand, 60 years ago, sealed and lying at this hour in the Testament vault, where by the law of Aldenreach it must be read aloud before this very conclave and cannot be opened by any chancellor or burned by any warden. I turned from Weimer to the 12, and to old Mescar in the high senior seat, and I said the words Benedin had given me, the words that ended it. I asked the conclave to open the Father's testament. "It is the law. Open it, and let the dead father name his own seal, and let there be an end." It was old Mescar who rose. Slow, stubborn, honest Mescar, whom Weimer's year of buying had never touched, because you cannot buy a man who wants nothing. He rose from the senior seat, and he looked at Weimer with a face like the black stone of the hall, and he said, "The guardsman has asked lawfully. The testament of the late father must be read before this conclave. It is written in the oldest law, and no chancellor and no conclave may deny it. I will open the vault myself, as is my right, and I will read what the Father wrote, and this hall will hear it in silence." And he looked at Weimer's household guards along the wall who had begun to move toward me, and he said, in a voice that had commanded stone halls before I was born, "The next man of the chancellery who lays a hand on that guardsman, or on either seal before the testament is read, offers violence to a lawful conclave and to the memory of the Father in the sight of every family of Aldenreach. Let him do it and answer to them." And the household guards stopped, because there is a limit past which even bought men will not go when the whole world is watching, and I saw Weimer understand that the tide had turned under him and could not be turned back. They brought the testament. Mescar broke the Father's seal on it before the whole conclave. The seal none of them, not even Weimer, had dared break while Benedin lived, and he unfolded the pages, 60 years of a father's written soul, and he read the passage that mattered in a slow, stubborn, carrying voice. And Benedin's dead voice rose up out of that vault and filled the chamber of keys, and it told them, in the old man's own words, of the copy and the true seal, and of the flaw in the inner curve where the wax never reaches, and it named which was which so plainly that no man could pretend to mistake it. And then Mescar came to the last line, the line I had added in the gray hours with my own hand, the line the old man had spent the last of his strength to write on his deathbed and seal with his thumb ring. And Mescar read it, and his hard old voice broke on it, and the whole hall heard the Father speak from the grave one final time. The true seal I have this night given into the keeping of the stillest and truest wall in my house, a guardsman who does not know his own worth and will not seize what he could. Trust him. He will bring it forth to save you and ask nothing for himself. Let no man harm him. He has been furniture to you and a keystone to me, and when you know all that he has kept, you will be ashamed you did not see him. They turned the two seals face up on the white slab, and the 12 came down from their seats, and even the 8 who had sold their votes came, because a man will suddenly want very much to be seen on the right side once the right side is plain, and they found the flaw, exactly where the dead father's voice had said it would be, on the seal I had laid down, and not on the one Weimar had reached for. And that was the end of Weimar. It was very quiet in the end. There was no violence, no chains dragged across the black stone. There was only a long, terrible silence, and a room full of men slowly turning their faces from the Chancellor, and the Chancellor standing alone at the choosing table beside the false seal he had schemed a year to press, with nowhere left to look and nothing left to be. He had voided himself before the whole house. A choosing pressed with a false seal is void, but he had not even reached the pressing. He had been unmade an inch above the wax, in front of every man whose vote he had bought, and there is no recovering from being seen that clearly. Within the month he had resigned every office and gone to a distant house of penance, and I have heard he lived quietly there and spoke to no one of what had happened, and I find, to my own surprise, that I do not hate him. Benedin did not hate Orsic either at the end. Perhaps that is the last thing the old man taught me, that the schemers are not to be hated but outstilled, defeated by men patient enough not to move. The conclave gathered again, clean this time, some weeks later, with the true seal on the table and the false one broken, and they chose a father honestly, a gentle, unambitious old scholar named Lauren, whom no one had bought because no one had thought him worth buying, which is exactly why Benedin from his grave would have approved of him. And they pressed the true seal to the choosing parchment, and it fell, and it was lawful, and the Sanctuary of Aldenreach had its 10th Holy Father, and the crack in the floor of everything had closed, and almost no one in that great house ever fully understood how near it had come to the edge, or who it was that had stood in the gap. Because I asked them not to tell it. That was the last thing and the hardest, and the thing I have never regretted. When it was over, when the true seal was safe in honest hands and the new father chosen and Weimar gone, the 12 wardens wished to raise me up. They wished to name me, to honor me, to make me a warden myself, or a lord of the household, or at the very least to tell the whole sanctuary what a nameless guardsman had done. And old Mescar came to me privately, the one man alive besides me who knew the whole of it, for I had never told him the deepest part, the part about my mother and my father and my blood, and I never did and I never have, and it lies buried in me where the old man buried it in the poorest place in the richest house. And Mescar said, gruffly, looking at the floor, "They want to make you great, lad. You've earned it thrice over. Will you take it?" And I thought of the frozen gate 30 years gone, and the woman who died to make me nobody so that I could live. And I thought of the old man's last cruel and tender charge, "I am going to give you a crown, and in the same breath forbid you to wear it." And I thought of Weimar and Orsic, and every man who had ever taken a thing meant for keeping and turned it into a thing for himself. And I found that the choice was not hard at all. It had been made for me 30 years before, at a gate in the snow, and made again in a lamplit room by a dying man, and all I had to do was keep it. No, I said, tell them nothing. Let it be recorded that a guardsman brought the true seal forth and nothing more of him. No name, no honor, I want to go back to my post. Mescar looked at me for a long time. Then the stubborn old face did something I had never seen it do. It softened, all the way through, the way the old man's had softened on the sleep morning 9 years gone. He said you'd say that, Mescar told me quietly. Benedin. He told me the once we spoke of you, that if we ever tried to reward you, you'd refuse it and ask for your post back, and that when you did I was to let you and not argue and just, the old warden's voice went rough, just tell you that he saw, that he always saw. That you were never furniture to him, not for one single day. And Mescar reached out and touched 2 fingers to the gray wool at my shoulder, the way a man tests whether a wall will hold, and turned and left me there. So I went back into the gray. I stood the 3rd watch again, outside the wing where the new father slept, on the coldest stretch of stone the old builders ever laid, and the great house forgot within a season that a guardsman had ever stepped out of the wall in the chamber of keys. New men came into the guard who had never heard of it. The kitchen boys did not know my name. I was, once more and forever, furniture. A still gray figure at a cold door, of no account, seen by no one, keeping the peace of a house that would never know I had once held its whole future against my heart in the dark. And I have never in my life been happier, or prouder, or more at rest. Because I know what I kept. On the cold nights, when the snow comes sideways past the high windows the way it did the night the bell rang for the 5th time, I remember. I remember a woman I never knew, who walked a long way to die at a gate so that I could grow up at all. I remember a name I will never speak, buried where no schemer will ever stoop to look. I remember an old man's ashlight fingers on my face, and you are still here, Corin asterisk and the true seal cold and heavy in my white glove, and the whole trust of a dying father put into a nameless guardsman's hands because, of all the walls in his house, I was the only one that never moved. They think I am no one. They are wrong and I let them be wrong, and that letting is the whole of my honor. I was the keystone. The whole arch of a great man's life came down to whether I would stay still in the crack, and I stayed still, and the arch stands, and no one knows, and no one needs to. The bell of Aldenreach still is not rung by hands, but I have stood beneath it now for many years, keeping my post, and sometimes on the deep winter nights I imagine that if it ever rings again of itself, one long note through the falling snow, it will be the old man, somewhere past the dark, telling me the same thing he told me at the last. You always came, you are always still here. And I always will be. That is the charge he laid on me, and it is the only crown I will ever wear, and I would not trade it for the high seat of the sanctuary itself. I am the wall that did not move. Let that be the whole of what is recorded of me. It is more than enough.